Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Vibrant Music Teacher Chat. This is the place for beautiful, wonderful, and amazing teachers like you who want to hear about the latest news and goings on in the music teaching industry, as well as get some tips on a specific topic each week. And new today, also dive into a specific book which we'll be exploring together week by week. You can also ask me anything at all, whether you're watching live or on the replay. I'll try to get back to all of your questions if you just leave a comment. If you're watching live, make sure to start with the word question so that I can come back to us. Now, if you haven't met me, hello. My name is Nicola Canton. I am the blogger behind Colourful Keys. Maybe you've read our blog before, or you've listened to the podcast, which is Vibrant Music Teaching. Or you're a member of Vibrant Music Teaching and somehow you didn't know who I was. Either way, it's fabulous to have you here, and we don't bite. We are a lovely, welcoming community. If you haven't said hello in the chat yet and you are watching, please let us know how your day is going. Let us know where you're joining from, and let us know if you're new so we can give you a huge, warm welcome. We are going to dive in to the latest news in the music teaching industry. Alright, so in my personal update, I have a few fun things going on. So in the studio here, I'm doing Christmas music. Has anyone else started Christmas music yet? Am I on my own over here? I doubt I am. But I would normally start it a little bit later than this. But there's two factors going into the fact that I started it early. Number one, we're going to be doing our Christmas concert, which we only do every 2 years. So we're doing one this year, and it's going to be on December 5th. So it's at the start of December. It's not like late in the month. Number two, we are working on memorization skills through our Christmas music. So that means starting extra early, right? If we're going to use it to learn about memorizing, which I thought would be a great opportunity since, it is helped a little bit by the fact that you're already familiar with the tune, etc., etc. But it's also just something that students are really invested in. I have to tell you, I started it last week, and I did hear from several students that their parents were going to be not the happiest about hearing Christmas music in September. Just a few students started on the last day of September. But anyway, in October, before Halloween, that's always a shocker for people, right? And yeah, so I started with the students, and some of them did say, oh, my parents are not going to be happy about this. Like, my dad hates hearing Christmas music before December kind of thing. I explained to them why, and that it's different if you're a performer and all of that. But also, they were delighted. I haven't had a student yet who hasn't been thrilled at the early start of Christmas music. So it is just wonderful to see the delight on their face and hear their awesome comments. One student told me that playing Silent Night felt like a cozy hug. I mean, seriously, how can that not brighten your week? I don't mind listening to Jingle Bells and Silent Night all day if that's what makes them happy, keeps them progressing, of course. So, Lee, that's really interesting. I used to have my students memorize for the Christmas recital, and they had the hardest time with this. Gave up on that one being from memory. So that's really interesting. So you do it for another recital. Memorization is not really a thing over here for concerts in general. And so it's something I try to introduce to my students every so often, since I know they won't encounter it that regularly. So I have to make quite a concerted effort to do that. I chose this period, partially because they'll recognize the Christmas tunes. Although, I will say that I won't require them to play from memory. I never ever do that. I do sometimes require my students to memorize the piece. Angela, all of yours are delighted too, yes. They're so thrilled to be starting Christmas music. Anyway, today's not about Christmas music. That's what I'm doing in my studio. In VMT land, I've been working on our survey. So we are going to be putting this out hopefully at the end of end of this week, early next week. We will be sending out the survey, which is our annual survey, which we do about the music teaching industry. Now, it's not a burden on you, I hope, to fill it in because of what you get back. What we do with that data, if you've seen our reports before, we put them all together and we crunch the numbers and we come up with interesting findings from all the data. And we're working to make this bigger and bigger every year so that it becomes this place you can turn to for what do people normally make if they teach in a rural area? Or is it really only me that feels this way about this, right? So we want to answer those questions, the burning questions you have in your mind. And so that's why we do the survey. Last year we had over 1,000 respondents. I'm hoping we can up that. So I'm hoping once I do have it out to you that you can share it wide. It's not just for members or readers or anything. It's supposed to be about the industry as a whole. So we want to get it out to as many people as possible. So I've been working hard at that, and we've also released some fun stuff. So if you are preparing for Christmas, we have our podcast out today about 4 fun DIY Christmas piano party games. So if you're planning any kind of a group event, Christmas or winter themed or whatever event for your studio, you're probably starting to think about what you're going to do at it now. And so that's why I wanted to get out there. I've actually been holding on to that article for over a year because I did that party. Like this is about my experience running this in 2019. Yeah, I've got that right. So 2019. And then I wrote up a bit about it, shared photos, whatever, put it together. And then the pandemic happened and I was like, well, this is useless. So we'll put out something else for 2020 and save this. So because they're like physical games, you have to be in the same room to play them. Like that's what it was all about. So I hope you enjoy reading about it and inspires you to give one a go. If not this year, then maybe in 2022 is when you're able to do that. It was a lot of fun, that party, and I'm so glad we had it just before everything started. Like we had just had this, so yeah, it was really nice to have that experience together before we weren't able to meet in person for a while. We also talked here on the YouTube channel about a very simple improvisation strategy, so if you want to check that out. And next week here on the show, we are going to be talking to parents about piano games. So that's what you can look forward to next week. Yeah, it should be a good one because I know some teachers struggle to convince parents or talk about it in a way that really shows parents how valuable games are in their teaching and how much they can do for their students and that kind of thing. So that's going to be our topic for next week. It should be a really fun one. Right. So that's all the news that I have to share with you today. Share your favorite links and things you've come across in the last week in the chat. And we will dive into our main topic of today, which is all about online piano workshops. So I've been running workshops online with my students for about, 16, 18 months, something like that. And so I've come across various things that do and do not work. I was very comfortable before this running workshops in person and very used to that and doing that with students at multiple different levels and ages and all sorts of permutations. But when it came to doing that online, it took some trial and error to find things that really worked and kept even the youngest kids engaged in our online group workshops. So I'm going to share a few different strategies. I would love you to share yours too if you've been doing this, and hopefully you can take some inspiration from these that you can use online or in person, right? So if you've ever considered running group workshops, these are some great things to try. Number 1 is my current favorite with all groups, including just having 2 students or sometimes just me and a student together, but especially at group workshops, and that is Rhythm Railroad. So what I'm going to do, there's no point me talking you through this, I'm going to show you it. Okay, we're going to try some Rhythm Railroad together because that is the best way to see how this works. So these are rhythm exercises with different actions. Here's what one looks like. You have the dark blue one, which is tapping both hands on a table or on your knees. The light blue one, tap one hand on a table or your knees. The green one is a foot, so you stamp your foot when you see that one. And the orange is your shoulders, so you touch your shoulders. And then we have tracks to go along with these. We have a slower track, which is the boat. And then we have a faster track, which is the airplane. So these have been so much fun in all my groups, and they work with students at all levels. Really, all of my students love these. And we have several levels already out. We're going to be going all the way up to level 6, and trust me, they get really challenging at that level. But even for a student who finds them slightly on the easier side or slightly on the harder side, sitting side by side doing this, they both get a lot out of it, because the one who's finding it a little bit challenging, they're just trying to keep up with it and internalize some of the rhythm patterns. And the ones who find it easier, they're going to get it really accurately or even mess around with the actions and have some fun with it that way. So let me just make sure the sound is on. Yeah, we should be good to go. So we're going to try the airplane because I think you guys are capable. Are you ready? There is a count in at the start of this. So there are 2 bars or 2 measures of count in the 3/4 and 2/4 one. So this one will be a 2 measure or 2 bar count in, and then it'll start. Give it a go. Don't just sit there. Try it out. So much like our Reading Railroad series, by having the backing track there, you can't stop, you can't go back. And it's not you as the teacher insisting that they keep going. They have to, and they understand that it's a track. They can't do anything else but go forward. So that's really useful. And as I said, we have the slower version there for students who are struggling. I'll show you one more of these. And let's skip ahead a few just for fun. Oh, this one is always super challenging. So I'll give you guys this challenge. It's really fun to do with students. They love it. And I've mastered it, so I can do it now, but I'd say the first couple of times I probably didn't do it entirely accurately. So, yeah, give it a go. It's a really fun one. We've got the heart on this one, so for me that's tap your chest, but some of my students like to make a heart symbol with their hands instead. I don't mind either one. Here it goes. Alright, how did you get on with that? Did it go well? Let me know. Even if it was a challenge, no one's going to shame you. It is not always easy to do those in time and follow the actions as you go. I'm always in time. I just don't always do the right action. I mix them up because I'm not the most coordinated person. But my students get a good giggle out of that, and so do I. So it's always really fun. Yes, Carrie, now you're awake for sure. Nobody needs coffee when they have Rhythm Railroad, right? Corey said, when will 4, 5, and 6 of Rhythm Railroad be coming out? Great question, Corey, because 4 is already out. So it came out on the 1st of October with the group of new games. And the next one will be November, and the next one will be December. So they'll be finished this year. There's one per month on the schedule, and then we've got lots of fun other stuff coming up next year, of course. So those are incredibly fun and sometimes very challenging for sure. And I can do them with students of all ages. So they're almost one of my favorite probably backup plans, is like I always have those open on a second desktop on my computer. I always have the full set open, so I can just jump into them at a moment's notice, and we can do those and try to challenge ourselves to go up in the levels and try different ones and all that kind of thing. If students are struggling with them, or we just want a different way to use them, I will have one of them say the rhythm, either counting or saying ta, ti, depending on the student, and the other one do the actions with me, or vice versa, or as an extra challenge, they have to say the rhythm while they do the actions, which gives them an extra process to go through in their brain. So we absolutely love those at all our group workshops. Yeah, it would be pretty small on a phone. You definitely want students to have a larger device if they can, for that reason. Same like Sharon, obviously you're just watching a show, but for students on a group workshop, I try to encourage them to have a larger device. I do occasionally have a student who just has a phone, and I do try to encourage them to flip it that way before we do a game or something like this, because it makes it that little bit bigger, and they manage to see most of it okay, or they follow along with what the other students are doing or something like that, but it's still fun. Yes, it's definitely more challenging while you hear the music. You see, there is the tambourine, so you may have heard that. That is reinforcing that you're on the right track. So students do get used to that and it gets easier over time. But it's definitely a coordination challenge, and that's the design of it, right? So, what else do we do? Another thing I love doing in my group workshops online and in person, but especially online, is to do practice strategies with my students. So we actually learn a practice strategy together. We go through the steps. Usually I'm the demonstrator, right? I'm the one, I pretend I'm practicing this piece, some short piece of music, and I show them each of the steps. And then they take turns to do each of the steps. So yeah, it takes longer and they're taking turns. So it's going around the circle. And obviously they have to then watch the other person do it. And then they do the next step. But it reinforces the pattern actually. And it gives them an opportunity to listen to each other struggling with something, right? Not doing it correctly on the first go. So something I love for this is practice plays. So these are little cards with practice strategies. There are 12 of them, and you can just choose one of those. I choose one before the workshop starts, like which one would be the most appropriate for this group of students, or just choose at random, and then go through the strategy with them. And they're all fun things. Like one of the simplest ones is just koala, kangaroo, caribou. And that's just 3 different speeds, right? So every student does it medium and then slow and then fast, or whichever order you want to do. And that's really useful as well. And it can prompt great discussions, in an age appropriate way, but just saying to them, which one did you find the hardest, each of you? And some of them, they find the slow one the hardest or the fast one the hardest, and the medium one is normally the favorite, right? But it teaches them a little bit about thinking through the process and trying different things in their practice. And then there are more involved strategies in there as well, which are great options to do with students and to teach them. But they get that extra reinforcement because the other kiddos are doing it as well. Yes. Corey, is the link to the version we used during a Zoom lesson of Rhythm Railroad exactly where we printed it off? Oh, I think you mean where do you get the Google Slides version? Let me know if I've misunderstood you, Corey, but that's, yeah, hopefully what you meant. So yes, you just go to the Rhythm Railroad page. It has the PDF button on it, yeah, but it also has the Google Slides button. So you click there to copy the slides version, and then you have it in slides, and that is what I screen share. Like that's what I screen shared just there. If you're in Zoom, of course, you need to make sure that when you click screen share, you click share sound so that they can hear it as well as see it. You have to tick that little button. Oh, Lee, I do it in different orders every time, which is why I kind of say the animals in different order. But to me, the animals always mean the same thing. So koala is slow, because koalas move like glacially slow. If you haven't seen one, I went to a sanctuary and held one when I was in Australia, and they're like barely moving. So I describe that to students. And then caribou is my medium, and kangaroo is the fast one. Although students debate that with me sometimes, so I let them swap it if they like. Those are technically the way around I see it, because the caribou, I'm picturing him walking. Anyway, that's how that one works. But those instructions are all in practice play, so just look up practice plays and you'll see the full set and all the instructions. They're just, each one comes on a little card, so it's really handy for you to have like, oh yeah, this is what this one is as a reference for yourself. So we do that with groups, and it does take a while, 10-15 minutes of the group time to go through, but it's really worthwhile, and some students really do pick those things up and use them during their practice straight away. Some will need to encounter the same strategy at several different workshops before they take it and roll with it. It's totally fair enough. They need to gain confidence. And some you could pick it up then at their solo lessons and reinforce it that way, right? So lots of options there. The one that most teachers tend to go for first is to do performances at group workshops. And I love that too. I gravitated towards practice as an alternative to that, but performances are another great option. So if you are going to do performances at your online group workshops, make sure you have given very clear instructions about what the listening students are to listen for. Because if you don't give those instructions, they are just going to faff around. And especially if they're sitting in their house, they might go get cake. Like, they're just going to run away, especially on the younger side, right? If their parents aren't there. So make sure you're giving really clear instructions about what they have to listen for. For my younger students, I like very simple instructions that afterwards I'm going to ask one person for something that they thought the person did really well, and one person for something that the performer could improve on. And I'm not going to tell you in advance, so you all have to come up with one thing good and one thing to improve, and then I'll ask randomly, and I make sure to ask everyone the same amount of times. Now, they hate coming up with the thing for the person to improve. I'm going to be honest with you, they do not like that. They're very resistant to it. But I think it's really good training in terms of giving feedback and receiving it for the performer. Although the performer normally isn't bothered at all. It's the person who has to give this criticism that finds it tough, and I think it's great practice for them, especially the ones who really are reticent to come up with anything negative ever. It's about the fact that we're all learning all the time. So yeah, that's what I like to do with performances. You can give other things to listen to. Obviously, with more advanced students, it's easier to come up with more specific things. But with the younger students, I do a lot of singing in my online group workshops because we can't sing at the moment in person. Now, that may or may not be true for you, but either way, singing is a great thing to do. Obviously, you can't sing and hear each other in unison on Zoom, but that doesn't mean you can't sing. So I will have students sing along with me and just make sure that I'm going to stay the one they can hear, or that I'm not worried about the fact that I can't hear them. But I'll also do a lot of echo singing, so back and forth, because obviously that works fine on Zoom. So you can do that with simple oral echoes, but you can also do folk songs and learning different things in this way, and learning any tune that you want to teach them. But it's a great opportunity for singing, and singing is one thing that I've really been missing in my studio that wasn't advised during the pandemic, so we weren't singing. And so this was an outlet for that. This was a way to at least keep them singing somewhat, because I'm so aware not just that about their pitch development or their oral development, but that some students are getting older and they're getting past the point where I can get them to be confident singers, people who sing out no matter what, even if they're not sure it's the right note. That happens much easier at a younger age, and I don't want students to miss out on that, right? My students learn we just sing here, and it's normalized. But if they come to me at age 12, it can be really tough to get them to sing with me. And so I was feeling like, oh no, some of these students are going to end up as my shy singers, and I don't want that to happen. So that's part of it as well. Another option, of course, this is my second last tip, and it's probably the most obvious to those who know me, which is to play games online. So I've pulled up one random example here, but there's just tons of slides games out there right now, so you can take your pick, really. This one is Chord Confuzzlement. I pulled it up simply because it was on my mind, because we played it the other day in the studio, but you can do it online as well. I played it with two 13, 14-year-olds, and they did not mind the silly graphics. They never do. That's a concern often teachers have that I think just doesn't come true when you don't react in that way, when you don't think it's embarrassing or kiddie, they don't either. So this one works on, they have to name the Roman numeral of the chord, but it's only C and G major keys and 1, 5, 4 and 5, 7 chords. So they're like this, just so you can see, like there are some inversions like that, and some are actually as chords and some are broken apart, right? So there's all different examples there. So it's a very simple format of a game, but it works great and people love moving around the funny hairstyle there by the confuzzled person with the chords. As I say, we have tons and tons of different Google Slides options games. That's just one of them. One of many at many different levels that happened to be on my mind right now, but that's a great way to get students together online and play games together. Now, my last one was listening together. And this is something that has surprised me in how effective it is. So I'd really encourage you to try this. What I'm doing here is I'm sharing a track. So playing a track from my end by clicking on the share screen button in Zoom, but not sharing my screen, only sharing sound. So if you're not familiar with that, we have a video about it, or you can ask me later in the forums if you're a member to point you towards that. But basically you just tick that box and you are sharing only your sound, not your screen, just the sound from your computer. And so you can play a piece of music. And I found this wonderful to get students of all ages to listen to some different musical examples, which I feel they often don't do enough of, and really talk about it and talk with their peers, talk on their level in their vocabulary. It's been a wonderful experience just to play different music for them and ask what they think about it and ask what the story is that might go with it or what instruments they hear if they can pick some out and move to it. I mean, while it's playing, even if I don't give them instructions about movement, I will often be swaying or dramatizing the flow of the music in some way, in some quite loose way. And so the students often join in on that. And I really like for them to know that they can move to classical music. They don't have to, it's not so serious and sitting still, right? I like to get that message across. So that's another wonderful thing. And I often like to do that last. I feel it's a great closer for an online group workshop because it gets students, yes, a little bit calming down after a game or after performing their piece or anything like that and chatting to each other. And of course, it can fill any length of time, right? So if you have a few minutes left and they don't end up chatting a lot, you can play another musical example or you can play the track again and you can close out the class that way. So those are just a few examples of the most useful things I've been doing in my online group workshops. There's loads of possibilities, but those are a few things that have worked really well for me. Question from Corey there. Do you pay for Zoom to host parties for up to 10 students for an evening? I pay for Zoom anyway, so that's not relevant to me. I need premium Zoom anyway. Most of my lessons have multiple students together and over half an hour, and anyway I use Zoom for Business, Corey. But as Anna Marie said there, you can get up to 40 minutes for free on Zoom. So if you are doing a shorter group workshop, that's an option. But it's usually worth the fee if you're going to be doing group workshops with any kind of regularity, just to pay the Zoom fee. And then there was one more there. Janine, what am I using for singing? You had a glitch. I didn't specify any specific singing resources. I just gave a few examples of doing like oral echoes. So like I sing a short phrase in solfege, they sing it back to me, or teaching them folk songs like common Kadai folk songs or things from our lesson plans that we have inside Vibrant Music Teaching. So things from the Tiny Finger Takeoff or Mini Musicians plans. It depends on the age and stage of the students, but learning folk songs like that, especially ones that have fun actions. Like Kadai folk songs will have games that go with them, which often you can adapt quite well online. Not always, but if there's swaying or there's clapping actions, you can do them at a screen. It works just fine. And then Lee asked, what length of online group shop... What was that sentence? Sorry, Lee. What length of an online group time do you recommend for each of the ages? So I do the same amount of time for everyone. In the past, I've normally done an hour. I've recently reduced to 45 minutes. That's not due to it being online or due to anything, except that I this year wanted to do more regular group workshops on weekdays, and so 45 minutes was what I could fit and was still perfectly fair to families. This is something I offer as a bonus in my studio, so students aren't paying extra for this. It's all rolled into tuition, right? So this was a way for me to offer more regular opportunities on weekdays, Tuesdays and Fridays at the moment. Some of them will be in person and some online, to offer both options to families. Okay, thank you all for the great questions. Let's move on to our book club. Right, so the book club is a new thing here in the Vibrant Music Teacher chat show. We are also going to be posting about this in the membership forums. So if you are a Vibrant Music Teaching member, you can already see my post with my thoughts there, and that'll give you another avenue to discuss the book as we go through. The book we're doing at the moment is Make It Stick. It's by Peter C. Brown. Some people have said already that this is our first week discussing it, but some have said, oh, well, it's a little bit pricey, so definitely try your local library if you want to pick it up there. If you are an Audible subscriber, it would be a great way to use your Audible credit. That's what I've done, so that you can listen to the audiobook. The Kindle version is also a lot more reasonable, so if you want to buy it digitally, Kindle, I believe it's on Kobo as well, but I already had the Kindle one, etc. There's lots of different options there. Definitely book it in with your library if you can as well. Many libraries have those ebook apps as well, so you could look in there. It's a great book though. It is one that I will be rereading several times, so I would say it's worth it. I've already read it in the past and now we're reading it again for book club, so it shows that it is worth a few quid. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about the first 2 chapters. So if you did read the first 2 chapters already, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm just going to share my main takeaways, and hopefully you can share some of yours, and hopefully this also encourages you to read it if you haven't done so already. So chapter 1 of this book is called Learning is Misunderstood, and there are so many great foundational things in this chapter which are really wonderful just to read through, and they're mostly things that he's going to go into in more detail later in the book. So don't worry if any of them kind of passed you by as you read through it, but it's a great grounding in all of the things he's going to be talking about. He starts off the book by giving an example of a pilot with an issue with his airplane, and he's in the air, and he has to figure out how to land safely. And I thought this example of how he has to have all this knowledge at his fingertips was a really good example of or relevant to music in terms of explaining why we can't just look things up in music. So to me, the closest relative is sight reading. Now, we're not going to crash a plane and die if we don't sight read correctly, although sometimes it feels like that in an exam or pressured situation. However, it is similar in that you can't stop to Google something in the middle of sight reading a piece, can you? So you have to have this knowledge at your fingertips without thinking. You have to just see writ and know what you're supposed to do, not have to think through or look something up in order to do it. So it is all about that immediate recall in that scenario. Now, if you don't want to sight read, you can be a bit slower, I guess, but I thought that was the most relevant to what we would be looking at. Yeah, the book is called Make It Stick. Make It Stick. It's by Peter C. Brown. Make It Stick, Peter C. Brown. The subheading head is The Science of Successful Learning. So one of my favorite quotes from chapter 1, I'll read out to you. It goes, "We are poor judges of when we are learning well and when we're not. When the going is harder and slower and it doesn't feel productive, we are drawn to strategies that feel more fruitful, unaware that the gains from these strategies are often temporary." So this is something I've been focused on a lot more recently with my students, and I'd love your thoughts on this. I think that students often think the strategies we're putting forth are supposed to be making their life easier. And they are in the long run, of course, we're teaching them something. But often, when we're suggesting a practice strategy, what we're doing is making the moment harder. I'll give you an example. Many of you will do the same thing that I do, where we sometimes encourage students to start at the end and add bars or measures going backwards, or do the last section and then the last section before that and then the section before that, working backwards towards the start. And this is a good example of when we're making it harder. It is easier to play the piece from the beginning, especially if you're familiar with the music, because you know how it's supposed to sound. It's harder to start at the end. But that's why we're doing it. And something I've been trying to do more recently is explain to students that this is what I'm doing. I'm purposefully making it harder. I'm encouraging you to do it this way because it is harder. Not in spite of that fact, but because it is harder, so your brain has to keep working. It's like exercising muscles, and I know people sometimes object to that parallel because your brain is not a muscle, it doesn't work the same way. But in this way, it is a good description, because if you were trying to get better at lifting weights, you shouldn't lift the easy weights, you should lift the hard weights. And so when we're making our brain work harder and keeping it engaged all the time, that's when we're learning. So I'm trying to be more honest, not that I was dishonest before, but more forthright about that is why I'm making you do this strategy. It's because it's harder. I'm doing that on purpose. This is intentional. It's not supposed to be easy for you, which is something I've learned a lot with my students over the years, is not to pretend something's easy when it's hard. Don't gloss over things. Acknowledge that it's hard, because otherwise you're saying to the student, you're finding this hard even though it's supposed to be easy, which sends the message that there's something wrong with them. I mean, we don't say it, we would never say that to a student, and we would never mean it. But it can be implied, it can be underneath what our messaging, right? So acknowledging that we're doing this on purpose, that it's supposed to be harder, is really, really useful, I think. And I think speaks to Peter's point there. I also love this other quote from chapter 1, which is, "Many people believe that their intellectual ability is hardwired from birth, and that failure to meet a learning challenge is an indictment of their native ability. But every time you learn something new, you change the brain. The residue of your experiences is stored." I like this because it just speaks to something I talk about frequently, which is my hatred of the words talent or musical, because although those things are partially true, there is some part where you're born a little bit more this way or that way. In every area of life, in every skill that you could acquire, you are slightly more or less, you have slightly more or less aptitude for that thing naturally. But the greater factor is the effort you put in. We all know that. And so he's saying the same thing about intellectual ability, learning ability, which he says later, that the learning is a skill, as I often say about music, and I'm sure you do too. Some of the points about mindless repetition, I actually believe we're ahead on, which, I mean, not to brag about our collective minds or anything like that, but when he's talking about rereading and reading over chapters as a way to learn, say, history, and that really doing very little except to convince you that you do already know it when you don't because you haven't tested yourself, I feel we're better about not encouraging that or not allowing that to be the norm for our students as they progress. Now, it doesn't mean that students don't naturally gravitate towards mindless repetition of pieces. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm saying us as teachers, we have more awareness already of that being a very poor strategy for learning to play something. And so I believe we're kind of ahead on that, which is always a nice feeling. In chapter 2, it's titled To Learn, Retrieve. And so I think some of the direct examples here aren't as relevant for us for sure. So it's about testing really and testing yourself on knowledge. And some of that is directly relevant if we're talking about like music theory or terms or things like that. But for a lot of the practical skills we're doing, we can't use that literally. However, I think it directly applies in memorization. So I'm having all my students at the moment memorize a Christmas piece, and at the same time I'm memorizing the theme from Love Actually, because I wanted to pick something vaguely Christmassy, but I didn't want to play a Christmas piece in my own practice, and because I want to put into place the strategies I'm teaching them at the same time, keep myself involved in the learning process. I think that's really important with something that wasn't a huge project. Like, I'm not at the same time as they're memorizing Jingle Bells, I'm going to memorize a sonata. No, I wanted to be something more relevant to what they're doing. And so I went with the theme from Love Actually. And the bonus is that I'll play it for my friend and she'll get a kick out of it at Christmas. So we're all going through this at the moment. And I think this is directly relevant to that. You have to keep testing yourself. When I'm learning this piece, I'm asking myself, do I really know that bit? What finger am I actually doing there? Am I just winging it, or do I actually know? Can I analyze it? Can I think it through? Can I imagine the sheet music? Can I tell myself the note names without playing anything or being anywhere near a piano? You get the idea. It's not all about note names, but you're asking all these questions and testing yourself, making yourself start in all these different places. That's what this retrieval process is all about. One thing, though, my number one takeaway from this chapter, actually from these first 2 chapters in general, this time around, keep in mind that it's the second time I've read this book, but this time, my number one takeaway has been this phrase: interrupting, forgetting. Isn't that elegant? I've loved it, and I've already used it with my students as a way to better explain things like interleaved practice. That can sound quite confusing to a student and it's counterintuitive, but when I explain that we're intentionally interrupting forgetting. So we're on purpose letting your brain forget it a little bit. That's why we're going away and doing something else. And then we interrupt the forgetting. So your brain is about to throw, this is literally how I say it to young students, but your brain is about to throw that out. It's saying, oh, you don't want this anymore, and it's kind of edging away towards the bin, right? And then you say, no, I want it. And bring it back, right? So it's like you've caught your mum or your dad throwing away your favorite jeans because they have holes in them, and you say, no. You're interrupting them throwing it out, and we're interrupting our brain forgetting. I just love that phrase. I thought it was really great, and I borrowed it straight away, and I've enjoyed using it with my students. So let me know your thoughts on the book, and if you'll be reading along with us. We're going to be doing this 2 chapters each week is the plan, just to keep it really simple. So 2 chapters each week, but if you fall behind or go ahead, that's always fine. Add your thoughts in. If you are a member, I'd love to hear your thoughts inside the community forums. I have a post there ready to go for you, so you can add your thoughts there and we can keep it all in one thread all together. And yeah, I really love this book. I loved reading it the first time, and I'm really enjoying revisiting it, so I hope you enjoy it too. And one more note about the book club: I do welcome other suggestions, so let me know if there's something you would love us to do next, and we can absolutely get to that. Okay, I promise I'll get to all the questions. So I have gotten to most of them as we've gone through, but just checking if there's any others that are left over here. I think there's just this one from Lee. So she said, I've used the playing backward strategies with my students. I was wondering, how many measures do you have them do in the lesson to get the idea down? Okay, so as far as they're successful is my answer to that. I want it to feel good by the end. Yes, it's hard work during, but I want them to feel like they got somewhere, but also that it's not overwhelming. So I normally start with the last 2 bars or 2 measures and then go 1 bar at a time backwards. It depends on the situation. If we're talking about memorizing from the end backwards, which is what I'm doing with my students right now, then on average we'd get to like 4 to 8 bars, something like that. But it very much depends on the piece and the student, of course. I'm also not necessarily expecting that the first week they will go away and do that themselves. I'm expecting that some students will, my most sort of follow through type students and the more experienced ones, yes, they will go away and add a few bars this week. But most of them, I'm expecting to have to repeat that next week. Sorry for that answer. That's a bit of a reality check. I'm expecting about half of them I'll have to do, another showing next week, and then maybe the week after, and then they'll start to realize that I'm not giving up on this and they have to put in extra bars at home. But hopefully that gives you a little gauge there, Lee. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been a blast. I hope you enjoyed the new book club element here and that you start reading along with us if you can. The book again is Make It Stick by Peter C. Brown. Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning. And we have the community post in the community forums for members who are watching. That's it for this week, folks. Have a fabulous week ahead, and I'll see you next time. I do sometimes require